Hey designers, my name is Keith with rivalENGAGE, and I'm going to be talking about 5 text reveals that you should know. Skip the intro, let's go. Number 1, the Cascading Fade. Oh, this is my favorite go-to text reveal. I'm going to open up this layer, go to the right, and hit Animate. I'm going to select Opacity. We're going to take that down to 0. I'm going to open up the Range Selector and Advanced. We're going to keep our units on percentage, but change the shape from square to ramp up. Then we're going to animate the offset. So I'm going to take this down to negative 100%, hit the stopwatch to make a keyframe, move ahead, and then move that up to 100%. What's really cool about this is that I could select the layer, hit Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to move this ahead just a little bit and then move this down. And now I could put something else in here. Everything is going to animate the exact same way. Of course, whatever else you put in there, you'll have to change this second keyframe. So if it's just like a single word, you're going to need to move that a little bit closer. If it's a longer sentence, you're going to need to move it wider. But let's see what else we could do with it. I'm going to come to the beginning of my layer, select the layer, hit P to open up my position transforms. I'm going to separate those dimensions because we only care about the X position. I'm going to hit the stopwatch and I'm going to move that keyframe aside. Then I'm going to take the X position and kind of move it over to the left since we're cascading from the left. And I'm going to move the second keyframe to about 1 second. So I want this to drift, but I want the full animation to happen before it settles into place. I'm going to select both of these keyframes and hit F9 for an easy ease, and go into the graph editor, make sure I just have my X position. And since we're starting from nothing, I like to pull that first keyframe up so there's an initial burst of velocity. As the cascading fade ends, then it just sort of drifts into its final destination. Number 2, the pop-in. The pop-in is going to be pretty basic. We're going to select the layer and hit S to open up our scale transforms. I'm going to go ahead and hit that stopwatch right now and move our keyframe aside. I'm going to come in here and just go ahead and put 0 because I want to start this from nothing. When I play this back, that's not what I expected. And that's because when modifying the scale, it's going to be very dependent on our anchor point and where that's located. So I'm going to hit Y. That's going to be our pan behind tool. I'm going to grab this anchor point and put it into the center of our text. So if I come to the beginning, that is a lot more of what I expected. However, it is a little bit boring. So I'm going to go ahead and select these keyframes, hit F9 for an easy ease once again, and go into the graph editor. I'm going to take the first keyframe and really start it with a burst of action because we can't see it right now. So this is not something that we're really going to notice. By the time the animation is completed, then it's like, oh, hey, now I'm going to slow down and settle into the position that I'm in. One thing we can add, we can do this to all transforms. So I'm going to put my playhead right above this second keyframe and then move that keyframe aside. I'm going to copy it with it selected with a Control C and then Control V, which will paste it right here at the playhead. And what I'm going to do is add a little overshoot. One thing about overshoots is you don't really want to go super crazy. We want something that is a lot more subtle. It just sort of briefly calls attention to itself and then it kind of settles into its final destination. And so if we take a look at this now, we can see it has just a little bit more personality. I'm going to come back into the graph editor and we're going to have this take its time to kind of settle into place. I'm going to extend out that middle keyframe there. And so now that pop-in just has a little bit more flavor to it for whatever you're doing with that text. Number 3, the swing in. You can probably tell what we're going to be doing here. So on the layer, I'm going to come over here to the right and find my column, and it has this little cube. And it's going to turn this into a 3D layer. Now, if you do not see this, come down here to the bottom left and make sure your buttons are toggled on. There are definitely times I have opened After Effects and have done absolutely nothing and all of my columns have disappeared for no reason. So I have to come over and toggle that back on so that way I can see all of my necessary columns. With the layer selected, I'm going to hit R, which is going to give me my rotation tools, and we're going to be messing around with this X rotation because I want this swing in to happen from the top. You are going to have to know where you want to swing this in from. If you want it to swing in from the bottom or the sides, I'm going to be doing it from the top, but it's all going to swing in from wherever we have our anchor point. So I have my pan behind tool already, and I'm going to move that anchor point where I want to swing this in from the top, and I'll put it in the corner relative to wherever I want to align this text. So if I needed to align it to something that's here on the left, I'm going to put it in the top left corner. If it's going to be something on the right, I'll put it in the top right corner. It just kind of helps keep everything organized for me. I'm going to come back to the beginning of our comp here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the stopwatch for the X rotation. I'm going to turn this to my starting position. I want to turn this until I can't see the text anymore. Now, you could get very close, and the thing is that when I move this out of the way, it's going to start from nothing. It's going to be blank. It won't be lingering there. So by the time this actually shows up, an animation is going to have started. So all of that, what we're seeing right now, is not going to matter so much if you can't get it perfect, but we want to get that sliver as small as possible. There, we can't see that anymore. The one thing to note too, if you're going to duplicate this effect and do it somewhere else, either pre-compose the layer, which then you can just move that comp anywhere that you want in your actual comp that you're animating in. If you're not going to do that, and you're going to deal with the text within the comp, it will depend on what position it is in the comp. So if I were to have the text up there at the top, I would need to turn this just a little bit more to get that sliver once again. That's not where I want to animate from, so I'm going to bring it back here to the center. I'm going to move ahead, and then we're going to bring it back to our 0 position. And so if we go back to the beginning and play what we have here, it's okay. It's not super interesting. But I'm going to select my keyframes and put an easy ease on it, and that'll make it easier for me to edit in the graph editor. I'm going to just isolate my X rotation here. And what I want with this one, since before we were starting with nothing and I wanted that initial burst of speed, but since this is a swing in, I kind of want to make it match a bit more of the physics of the thing and give it some inertia. So it's going to start slow and then end real fast. And so if I were to play that back right now, it looks a little bit more typical. So unlike the overshoot that we did with the scale, whenever I do a swing in like this, I actually love to always include an overshoot because it just makes it look a lot better. So I'm going to add a keyframe here. That will be my ultimate destination. And I'm going to modify this middle keyframe here and make it swing forward just a little bit. Not too much, but you can be a little bit more generous with the overshoot when it comes to the swing in. And we can see that it has just a little bit more interest and personality being added to it. And sometimes I even like to add a little extra overshoot. So I'm going to even move this last keyframe even more. I'm going to actually copy it and paste it so that way I can start with the base. I'm going to swing it back just slightly, just like so. 9 degrees looks great. So we're going from about 91 degrees, so it's all the way back, swinging forward to a negative 20 degrees, then forward to 9 degrees before we settle in to our 0. And you can even pull this out a little bit if you want to give it a little more time to settle in. But now we have just a little bit of an impact that's happening. We don't want to go too crazy with this, but we might be even able to punch this up even just a little bit more. Let's bring this to, say, 11 degrees. And this is one of those things where you can play with it a little bit. Like now that's swinging forward a little too much. If I go into the graph editor here, we can see that we're not exactly getting a result that I would hope for. So I'm selecting these keyframes and hitting this button down here, which turns these into an auto Bezier. So that way I could kind of move both handles of each side a little bit better. So when this swings down, and then it kind of slows before it comes back. Let's go ahead and adjust. Let's go ahead and select this keyframe and adjust that a little bit. And then it settles into its final position. So it's not having that jerk that's happening when it hits this keyframe anymore. And it looks like something that you would kind of expect, a little bit more natural. Number 4, the pocket reveal. So I actually don't call it the pocket reveal. I just needed to give it a name. I'm going to come up here to the top and select my rectangle tool, or you can hit Q and that'll open up the same thing. Make sure you do not have a layer selected when you are going to draw your shape. So if I were to have this reveal layer selected and then draw my rectangle, it's actually going to create a mask, and that is not what we're looking for. So I'm going to come down here and just make sure I don't have any layer selected because I want a new shape layer to be created. We're going to be doing a matte, and whenever dealing with mattes, and particularly with a shape layer, I actually prefer it to have a fill only. So I'm going to come up here to the top and hit stroke so that way I can turn it off. It makes it easier to see where everything is going to show up. I'm going to position this just right because right now it is actually showing a bit of my text right underneath. And I'm going to take my pocket text and put it under that shape layer that was just created. I'm going to come over to my column to add a track matte. I'm going to change this from none to alpha inverted. And what that's going to do is a couple things. One, it's going to automatically turn off my layer right above it. It's also going to put these symbols in here that's going to indicate that Pocket is now using the layer directly above it as a matte. And so if I turn this back on, we can see it's still here, it still exists, and we can also see the bounds of this path. That's why I wanted to turn off the stroke. But basically, setting the track matte to alpha inverted is saying, hey, anywhere there is no alpha on the layer directly above it, go ahead and show this layer. Let's go in here with an animation. I'm going to hit P on my pocket layer, and I'm going to right click on position and hit separate dimensions. We are going to animate the Y position, so I'm going to put a keyframe here and move that to the side, and then I'm going to move pocket down, and we can see that it is starting to hide pocket. I'm going to pull up my shape layer again, and it's cutting it off exactly where the alpha starts with this shape layer. I'm going to turn that back off and go ahead and finish our animation here. We're going to keep going until we can't see pocket anymore. And I'm going to select my keyframes, hit F9 to put in easy ease. That's just going to make it easier to come over to our graph editor, select our Y position, and I'm going to move this so we have that burst of speed once again because we can't see pocket. So if we were to take a look at what that looks like right now, you see that now it just pops up out of that shape layer. But that's not all. Let's go ahead and do that to our reveal text as well too. I'm going to select that shape layer and hit Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to put my reveal text under that new shape layer, and I'm going to come over here to track matte and select alpha matte. So this is going to do the opposite of what it's doing with pocket. If I turn this on, we can see that it's there in the same position as the other shape, but this time I want it to show reveal wherever there is this alpha. I'm going to select my reveal layer and hit P. I'm going to separate my dimensions once again. I'm going to hit the stopwatch for the Y position, come to the front, and we're going to move reveal up until we can't see it anymore. So about right there. I'm going to select those keyframes again, hit F9, go into the graph editor, and just isolate my Y position here and make this come straight up. Now, if we were to play this back right now, we can see it's looking pretty sweet. And let's see if we can even this up a little bit so that way we have a very similar animation happening to both of these at the same time to reveal at the exact same spot, because that's where our shape layer is, and that is exactly how we wanted to handle this. And finally, number 5, the fade in. Okay, it's quite clear what we're going to do with this. I'm going to select the layer and hit T to open up my opacity. I'm going to go ahead and hit that stopwatch. I like a fade in that takes about 8 frames. It's just what I tend to start with whenever I do this. And then we're going to take our opacity down to 0. If we play that back, of course, we have a very basic fade in. Now, actually, I don't so much like to do a fade in when I can, but what I do like to do, I'm going to select both of these layers and come here to the end, and I'm going to copy and then paste. I'm going to right click on the selected keyframes, come down to Keyframe Assistant, and hit Time Reverse Keyframes. So instead of doing a fade in, we do more of a fade out. What I'm looking to do is get visual attention to that text, but I don't want it to have attention when it leaves. I kind of prefer to go to whatever animation that I have at the start, then fade it out nicely. And that's it. That is 5 text reveals that you should know. I actually have a few more that I think I'll do a follow-up video on that adds just a little bit more style, but it's still basic enough that it's good to have in your arsenal, even if you don't use them. It's just different ideas of how you would be able to do things. Before you leave, do not forget to like and subscribe, but really, until next time, stay hungry, designers.